What you're looking at right now is a picture of Matty Healy wearing a 1989 album shirt in 2014. By all accounts, this very shirt is the reason that Matty and Taylor met. Taylor appeared to have a reaction to Matty wearing the shirt on Tumblr, and shortly after that, she was at his concert. The rest is history. In May of 2023, Matty wore this shirt again at the Eras Tour. Most fans took it as a sweet callback to the first time Taylor and Matty met. But what if it was more than that? Could Matty be sending a secret message, a subliminal code, an emboldened Easter egg suggesting that not only does he love the 1989 album, but could he secretly be the muse of 1989? Buckle up, guys. Let's get into it. Here's what I will say. I am skeptical. Because by all accounts, Matty and Taylor did not meet until after the 1989 album came out. To prove that 1989 is about Matty Healy, you would have to prove not only did Matty and Taylor meet before the 1989 album came out in fall of 2014, you'd also have to prove that they met, fell in love, started dating, broke up, then got back together, then broke up again, then had a late stage fling, all before this public meeting occurred. Because that's what the 1989 album is about, right? The first song written for 1989 is called This Love. It's about a love coming back to her. 1989 is a continuation of a love story that was started in the spring of 2012 when Taylor wrote some of the songs for Red. There is a through line from some of the songs written in spring of 2012 about a new muse on Red is continued on the 1989 album. Treacherous is a good example of this, but that's a video for another day. But basically we have to establish this in-depth, intense connection for Matty and Taylor if Matty is the main muse of 1989. So let's try and put Matty and Taylor together before the fall of 2014 when the 1989 album came out. So there's two times, one in late 2013, one in early 2014, that Matty brings Taylor up in interviews, just saying she's been nice about the band and supportive to them in some way.
Taylor Swift likes us. I thought that was quite cool.
And in March of 2014, Matty mentions that the 1975 had been asked to open at some point for Taylor Swift on the Red Tour, but they had to decline it. Also, there are reports of Jamie O'Born, who's a manager for the 1975, getting tickets to the Red Tour from Taylor herself. So these instances are the only evidence we have of Maylor being in touch at all before the fall of 2014. So if they had something going on, it was entirely private, very hush-hush, very under the radar, which is possible, but like I said, I am skeptical. However, there are a couple theories put together by Maylor enthusiasts that I do find fun. So let's get into these theories. Maybe Matty and Taylor met before 2014. This first theory, which I'm going to call the driver theory, comes to us from Reddit user Conscious Swan 6227. Basically, Conscious Swan uncovered that Matty used to be the driver for a band called Every Avenue. Every Avenue was the opener for Boys Like Girls in 2009 for the UK leg of their tour. And real ones know that Taylor probably dated the lead singer of Boys Like Girls, Martin Johnson, in secret in 2009. Now, the Martin Johnson theory really has some legs. They used to hang out back in the day. They wrote some music together, and even Ashley Tisdale, who dated Martin Johnson, kind of confirmed that yes, Martin did date Taylor.
And so as he leaves, he just goes, oh, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And he goes, Taylor Swift wrote this song about me. And he leaves. What? I literally was just like, but I do know Taylor, and I asked her because they had dated.
So the idea is that Taylor went to see Martin perform in the UK, and this Reddit user seemed to drill out maybe the only days Taylor could have been there was January 30th, 2009. The theory suggests that some of Taylor's 2023 outfits that she wore while she was dating Matty are perhaps reminiscent of an outfit that she wore during these days. And maybe Matty's song 102 has to do with this meeting, 1 representing the month of January and 02 at the O2 Arena where this concert was. So I really appreciate theories like these. I think they're fun, but there's a problem with this. And that problem is that Taylor does not seem to have gone to England during this time. Don't get me wrong, she could have, but she was doing press in New York on the 28th and press in Canada in Toronto on the 29th. Then we kind of get her back in Nashville. Soon after that, she was doing a Rolling Stone interview at the time, and it seems like maybe some of that was done in Nashville at this time. So I'm not saying she definitely didn't jet off to England to see Martin perform, but just that there's no hard receipt of her being there, and it does look like she was busy with other things. There are, of course, no fan reports of Taylor being at the show, no pictures or videos or sightings or tweets about her being there. So this is all 100% hearsay, but it is possible that a connection via Martin Johnson, via the band Every Avenue, via Matty being their driver is what brought them together in early days. I also reached out to the band Every Avenue on Instagram to see if Matty really was their driver. They have not answered, but if they have, by the time I'm editing this, I will insert their answer here. For now, the only evidence of Matty being their driver do come from a fan report on Reddit, which is like a decent little bit of evidence, but of course Reddit comments you do have to take with a grain of salt. So for me, I of course have this lofty standard of being evidence-based gossip here, and there's not a lot of hard evidence to back up this theory. So it's hard for me to fully buy into it. Personally, I would have to see a picture of her there, find a tweet of someone saying, oh my God, Taylor Swift's at the show tonight, or something like that, for me to believe that she was there, or even in the UK at this time. But it is certainly possible that she was there. Next, let's get into the MySpace theory. I want to give credit to Tayfabe75 on Tumblr for putting together this theory. So the premise of this is basically that they met on MySpace. And this is possible because they both were on MySpace back in the day.
MySpace is an awesome new thing. It's an online website where people can really connect with artists. Every night I really try to keep tabs on my MySpace and see people who are leaving me comments.
Oh. I was like king of MySpace when I was like 15.
When we were 16, 17, there was no pictures of our faces. There was no this and that and that. It was just a MySpace page with music on it. And for some reason or another, some girl who followed another band or something had met our manager and told him about our MySpace page, and he'd checked it out.
I'd post my songs on my MySpace. And yes, MySpace.
So they were both on MySpace talking about music.
And I would message with other teenagers like me who loved country music.
I'd have to admit that, like, when I was a kid, my favorite record was Wide Open Space, the Dixie Chicks.
The artists that made me want to be in country music were artists like Faith Hill and Shania Twain and the Dixie Chicks.
Taylor was talking about country music. Maddie's admittedly a fan of country music, so maybe they did meet there. This theory goes on to make a great point that Love Story could really match up for Maddie because it's about this bad boy that Taylor's parents didn't want her to be with, and Matty does fit that description. He is a bit of a bad boy, right? She even gave this quote about Love Story years ago.
This song, I wrote it right after my one epic teenage tantrum that I ever threw in my whole life. And I remember screaming something like, "But Daddy, I love him!" and running out and storming into my room and slamming the door. And then I sat down on the floor and wrote this song.
Now that's really fun, right? Because But Daddy, I Love Him, by all accounts, is supposed to be about Matty Healy. Also, this happened. Furthermore, in Taylor's NYU graduation speech, she brings up MySpace and then shortly after that brings up her private life.
And I would message with other teenagers like me who loved country music, but just didn't have anyone singing from their perspective. Having the world treat my love life like a spectator sport in which I lose every single game was not a great way to date in my teens and 20s, but it taught me to protect my private life fiercely.
So is she maybe alluding that some of this private life that she's so fiercely protective over has something to do with MySpace? What I will say is I do find this speech connection a little bit tenuous, but I see what they're saying. The cherry on top is that Taylor later wore an NYU sweatshirt when she was hanging out with Matty. So is she trying to send an Easter egg here? We know Taylor does send Easter eggs in her clothing.
Easter eggs can be left on clothing.
So let's say that NYU shirt was an Easter egg, suggesting that people go take a closer look at her NYU speech and maybe put together 2 and 2. She talked about MySpace. She talked about being fiercely protective over her private life. So maybe that private life started on MySpace. Fair enough. I see what they're saying. If I look at this in a vacuum, I kind of get it. Lyric parallels, Easter eggs, old quotes, those are all fair game to use as supporting evidence in a Taylor Swift-based theory. But here's my problem with this. Why would it be such a secret? Now, don't get me wrong, I can see why early country Taylor would have hidden a connection with Matty Healy. Since he was such a bad boy, that would have been bad for her image. She was famous for being America's sweetheart good girl for a long time. I can understand an argument here that it would not be the best PR for them to go public with a connection early in Taylor's career. In fact, this is exactly why everyone says that Martin Johnson was kept under wraps, because he was kind of a bad boy and their relationship was pretty much kept under wraps for a long time. But it wasn't, though. Not entirely. We have pictures of them together, they wrote music together, and Ashley Tisdale did confirm that they dated. And trust me, I study secret celeb relationships professionally, and my feeling is that evidence for these things does come out eventually, just like it did for Martin and Taylor. So my question is, if Matty and Taylor met way back in the day on MySpace, and Taylor was tickled enough to Easter egg it, and sort of like send this subliminal message that that's what happened, why would she even bother Easter egging it? Why wouldn't she just share that? Why is it being kept a secret now? When Matty and Taylor got back together officially and publicly in 2023, it's hard for me to understand why this wouldn't have come out. Or even back in 2024 when they got together the first time. Again, why wouldn't this have come out that they knew each other for a long time before that? I mean, Matty is obviously famous for kind of running his mouth.
Sorry if I've offended you and like Ice Spice. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of things that I've said, jokes that I've made that I would take back. But you know what? There's probably a couple of fucking songs that I'd take back if I had the choice.
Mick Jagger used to like to get while he was singing in the booth.
I'm circumcised.
He doesn't really seem to be the type to keep secrets. It's hard to imagine that at some point Matty wouldn't have mentioned that he and Taylor knew each other from way back in the day. I just can't understand a motive for it to be a secret that must be Easter egg now instead of just commented upon, right? Because Taylor uses Easter eggs for a few things. She uses them to promote her music, engage with fans, but she also uses them to tell us things that she's not actually publicly allowed to say. For example, a lot of Taylor's Easter eggs pop up in music to let us know who the song is about. She kind of got famous for doing this. I think Taylor considers it poor taste to point blank say who a song is about.
You know, this song is about my life and I've never revealed who it's actually about.
So to avoid the faux pas of just dragging someone's name by saying this song is about them, she gets around this by Easter egging who it's about. And by the way, I have a podcast episode all about decoding Taylor's Easter eggs. So if you're interested in that, make sure click the link below, check that out. But yeah, if Taylor is Easter egging that she and Matty met on MySpace, it's because she wants us to know but isn't allowed to say it publicly. And my question is, why couldn't she just say that now? So this leaves me skeptical. And while I find all the connections that this blogger put together fun and like compelling to an extent, I remain skeptical because there's another factor that does make me find it nearly impossible to believe that Matty and Taylor dated well before the fall of 2014. Even though they were never seen together and barely ever mentioned each other, they didn't interact on socials, none of that. None of that happened until the fall of 2014. Like, this relationship was so untoward and scandalous that it wasn't allowed to be commented upon publicly for years, to the point where they couldn't even be seen together once ever. But then somehow randomly in the fall of 2014, it's all okay and they're allowed to make an absolute public spectacle of themselves, because that's what early stage Maylor was. And frankly, going through the timeline and seeing what a chaotic mess this first iteration of them dating was has made me want to do a deep dive video on that. So please make sure to subscribe and like this video so you'll get brought back for when I do that video, because when I do it, it's going to be insane. Anyway, so this theory, you have to posit that it was never allowed to be shared publicly, then it was allowed to be shared very publicly, but when it was being shared very publicly in that fall of 2014, after they met, it never came up. Matty never said in one of the many interviews that he talked about Taylor in that, like, oh yeah, by the way, we've actually known each other for a while. None of that. That secret didn't come out. But instead of mentioning, oh yeah, we've been in touch for a while, Matty just carries on this charade by saying they only just met.
I met Taylor Swift, and that was really nice.
Now, Matty, I reckon, this is my hit prediction, that Taylor Swift and you are going to be the next big thing. You're going to be an item.
Yeah, I mean, we exchanged numbers. Let's see what happens. What bloody hell are we going to do? Go out with Taylor Swift? I mean, she's a sensation. Wouldn't say no.
He's not allowed to say that they've known each other, but he is allowed to say that they've exchanged numbers and they'll see where it goes. He's allowed to say she's a fan of the band and invited them on the Red Tour, but not, oh, and we happen to know each other from the internet, or, oh, hey, we met back in the day at a concert. Because like I said, the 2014 era Maylor was a spectacle. Taylor fangirled over Matty publicly multiple times on Tumblr, showed up to his shows. She seemed to get completely blasted. She did this at one of his shows, ruining many people's brains and lives. Matty, too, appeared off his rocker, dedicating songs to her, singing her praises. They allegedly hooked up.
This is Cam coming to you during the edit, so something crazy is happening. I went back to my notes to pull the receipt on Lauren Lancanetti, whoever, hooking up with Matty Healy and talking about how she hooked up with Matty and Taylor Swift hooked up with him the night before, and Matty talked about it. There was a video of this on TikTok. The account has gone private, and I cannot find any other video or receipt of this anywhere. The only receipts that exist online are people linking my podcast where I talked about it. And I'm kicking myself now for not putting the audio into the podcast episode, but I didn't. I just read the quote. Now, I would be loath to start a conspiracy theory, but why has this clip disappeared? Why can I not find it anywhere? So this influencer named Lauren, she goes on to a podcast and says she, meaning Taylor, had sex with Matty Healy. I had sex with Matty Healy the night after. I got Taylor Swift's sloppy seconds and I was happy about it. And now the video has been erased from the internet. But there you go.
Also, Lainey Gossip talked about it. Matty is bringing her up in interviews and he's saying they just met. So they can spill all this publicly. They can put on this crazy spectacle of a relationship. But they're not allowed to say they knew each other before. Like, it's rare to see Taylor Swift lose control, but I would say these hectic few weeks, she really did. And I would say it's pretty common to see Matty Healy lose control, and that's why it's really impossible for me to believe that they had already been dating for years before this. This scandalous relationship is unfolding for the public to watch. They have loose lips, they're talking about each other, they're hanging out all the time, and they're wearing their hearts on their sleeves for each other, which is very much in character for both of them, I will say. But Matty is lying when he says this.
I met Taylor Swift, and that was really nice.
And in the meanwhile, there's never been a single picture of them together. They were never spotted together. There's never been a tweet from back in the day saying like, oh, crazy, I saw Taylor Swift hanging out with Matty Healy. Nobody's gone on Reddit to say, yeah, people don't know this, but they knew each other before 2014. There's never been a report from a member of a band that they toured with mentioning that they showed up to support each other. And remember, the idea is not just, oh, they knew each other before 2014. The idea is they've been having a crazy, passionate, off and on relationship all the way back as far as 2006, 2007, and that Matty is the main muse for most of her songs. Meanwhile, Matty didn't even follow Taylor on Twitter until November of 2014. I just have trouble buying it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they definitely did not have a secret relationship, but what I will say is I feel like they didn't. And let me explain where that feeling is coming from. What if I told you that over the years I have devised a way to suss out if two celebs are in a secret relationship? On October 21st, 2021, I posted an episode to my podcast feed called Lesbian Jesus and the Not So Secret Ship. In this episode, I talked about the fabulous lesbian pop artist Hayley Kiyoko and her adorable girlfriend, reality TV's Becca Tilley. So what's notable about this? Well, I'm not trying to be smug, but Becca and Hayley did not publicly confirm their relationship until May of 2022. I was 8 months early, so how did I know they were dating? Well, it was clear to anyone who took a closer look at their lives that they were together. They hung out constantly. They traveled together both for pleasure and for work. Becca went to Hayley's concerts, for example. They interacted on socials all the time. And it was just really super clear that they were together. They were just keeping it under wraps. Doing these concrete things, being spotted together, traveling together, interacting on socials, and supporting each other is what I have come to call the Bailey Standard. A set of actions that two people can do that will make me ship them. As the messy little gossiper that I am always curious about secret celeb relationships. And once I realized we had this outline from Becca and Hayley, aka Bailey, of what a legitimate and publicly confirmed, previously private celeb relationship looked like, I figured I could apply this logic to other relationships, thus bringing forward the Bailey Standard. So for me personally to believe that two people are in a secret relationship, I want to see them doing some of these things. Now let me say, this is not foolproof. People can be doing these things and not be in a secret relationship. They could just be best friends. And also, people can be in a secret relationship and still not quite do all these things. But it's just a rule of thumb, right? It's like Occam's razor. And what's funny about Matty and Taylor is that they fabulously meet the Bailey Standard, but only after their public meeting in the fall of 2014. We have Taylor supporting Matty at gigs, Matty talking about Taylor in interviews, Taylor interacting with Matty material on Tumblr, Matty dedicating songs on stage to Taylor and liking her Instagram posts and following her on Twitter. But before this period, it's essentially nothing. A couple mentions of Taylor from Matty in interviews, and that is basically it. And by the way, during these mentions, Matty does not sound in love at all. As I said, Matty is a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, just look at him. Like this guy, he's bringing up the love of his life in interviews and there's not a twinkle in his eye at all.
Like Taylor Swift likes us. I thought that was quite cool. Tiny Temper, he likes us. Chloe Grace Moretz, the girl from Kick-Ass and Carrie and stuff like that, she likes us.
Now listen, I can't say for certain that they didn't date before 2014 and that for certain Matty is not the muse of 1989. And if it sparks joy for you to believe that they met at a Boys Like Girls concert back in 2009 or even earlier than that on Myspace like some people believe, I'm all for you believing that. Fandom is supposed to be fun, and many people approach the personas of their favorite celebs wanting to fictionalize them a little in terms of that celeb's private life. And I think that's totally normal and fine as long as you're maintaining appropriate boundaries with said celeb. But I don't think I personally have enough evidence, remember this show is all about evidence-based gossip, to believe that 1989 is about Matty Healy. The thing about Matty and Taylor, like I pointed out before, is that their love is loud. When they were on, and everybody knew it. Look at 2014 when they were dating, and look at 2023 when they were dating. They made it so obvious how much they cared for each other. Another thing that's important to remember is that back in 2012 and 2013, when she was writing 1989, Taylor was a lot more public. Most of her days are actually accounted for, and she chronicled more of her life on social media. We know a lot about what she was doing in those days and who she was doing it with, and Matty is just completely off her radar. Another thing I'll say is I've been doing this for a while, and I have sources and industry insiders. Now, I have a whole video about times these insiders have been right and why I trust them, and you can check that out to verify for yourself everything I'm saying. I've gotten a lot of tea spills about Taylor over the years. I've heard crazy stories about her and Jake Gyllenhaal. I've heard interesting things about certain boyfriends of hers not being real. I've heard details about her and Joe Alwyn's breakup. All of that is available on my Patreon podcast if you want to go check that out. But basically, I have not heard a word about Taylor and Matty meeting before 2014. And let's keep in mind, thanks to Martin Johnson and Ashley Tisdale, we know what a private Taylor relationship looks like. Sure, it can be kept secret to an extent, but there will still be some hard evidence to back it up. For me personally, Matty does not meet this standard until after 1989 is released. In my humble opinion, the 1989 album cannot be about Matty Healy. But if it brings you joy to fanfic a little and believe that it is about him, I mean, listen, style, long hair, slick back, a bad boy, I get it. And I'm all for you believing that. I would love to hear in the comments to know what you guys think. And please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I've got a ton more coming in the pipeline. Please let me know topics you'd like me to cover in the future. And with all that said, everybody please stay safe in 2025. Make sure to subscribe and gaslight Gatekeep Girlboss immediately. Bye everybody.